After the success of Batman the Ride at Six Flags Great America in 1992, theme parks around the world rushed to install a version of the B&M inverted coaster at their parks. By 1994, 8 inverted roller coasters had opened in theme parks around the globe, including Europe's first inverted coaster opening at Alton Towers. Just 1 year later in Germany, the world's largest portable inverted roller coaster debuted, a coaster created by Intamin, with parts subcontracted to Gerstlauer, Mack Rides, and Giovonola, who would once again use their box-style track. A ride that would later be sold to a park in Russia and disappear for numerous years. Oscar Bruch was born into the showman industry that he would work in for his whole life, and was no stranger to creating huge travelling attractions. Attractions that you would expect to be fixed in place, but were not. The first travelling looping coaster, Looping Star, was manufactured by Schwarzkopf and introduced in 1978. Anton Schwarzkopf would go on to introduce other huge travelling coasters such as Thriller, one of the more intense travelling coasters, which debuted at a fairground in 1986. Oscar Bruch would go one step further after seeing the reception to B&M inverted coasters, such as Batman the Ride, open at parks around the world. He wanted a travelling version. The requirements for such a huge travelling attraction are vastly different from one that would be constructed once and remain in place for the majority of its life. One issue was that moving and rebuilding coasters would cause them to become rougher and rougher, just like so many that have been in the Six Flags rotation program. Unlike those, these rides would not have to be moved and rebuilt once, but many times, in unbelievably short windows of time, and require a huge amount of people to do so. Not only would it have to be rebuilt, it would have to be moved across the country on trailers. Time consuming, labour intensive, and more importantly, not cheap. Because of all these additional requirements, many manufacturers just avoided making anything that had to travel. Other than Schwarzkopf, very few large-scale movable coasters had been built. In the late 80s, Anton Schwarzkopf had fallen ill, and hopes for large-scale travelling coasters were fading. Those hopes, however, were saved by one man, a frequent collaborator who had worked under Anton Schwarzkopf himself, Werner Stengel. While he had worked on tons and tons of rides before, many with world's first such as Revolution at Magic Mountain, he was also a consultant for Walter and Claude, working on that very first inverted roller coaster design, Batman the Ride. It was from that experience he would bring into this new travelling ride for Oscar Bruch. The new hot ticket attraction, the world's largest travelling inverted roller coaster. After much speculation, it was confirmed. A full-size, Stengel-designed 4-inversion inverted thrill coaster that could travel around to fairs was in development.
Der Eurostar soll bald 33 Meter gen Himmel ragen.
Under the supervision of the Bruch Engineering Office, the development and construction of the attraction began in 1993. It would not be designed or have any involvement by B&M, who considered the project to be too risky. Instead, a consortium of roller coaster companies would work on the ride together. Rather than one company work on the attraction and deliver it, the supervising office would give individual tasks to several subcontractors and coordinate it all together into a complete package. This included Intamin, who was the lead on the project, or more specifically, their subcontractor, Giovonola, the exact place Walter and Claude had previously worked. The Stengel engineering team conducted the calculations based on a rough track layout designed by Oscar Bruch, and a detailed model was built. Sub-project management was done by Intamin, who designed and produced the control system. Giovonola would use that iconic box track they had used in the past once again, and they would also create the lift and most of the electrical systems. The supports were produced by Manhart, a German company that actually declared bankruptcy during the construction period, and Oscar Bruch founded a company to take over the section of Manhart that was working on the supports to make sure it was completed. Mack Rides built the cash box area to take payments for the ride, while the station and entrance and exit area were constructed by Johann Gerstlauer, whose brother Hubert owns the Gerstlauer company, another who had previously worked for Schwarzkopf. The trains were also unique, using the 4-across design in stripped-down B&M inverted style seating. They were made by an unknown Dutch company and assembled by Giovonola. They didn't feature seatbelts like the B&M versions, most likely to decrease loading times. The station also did not feature the moving floor found on the B&M inverted coasters, though you couldn't reach the floor when sitting anyway, so it didn't really matter. To choose a name for the ride, they would be inspired by the multiple manufacturers all over Europe who would work on it, calling it the Eurostar. Nothing to do with the train between France and England that had opened the year before with the same name. Each part of this engineering marvel would come together to create one of the most impressive feats of engineering in roller coaster history. A 1,200-ton, 126 segments of track that will be 2,769 feet long, and yes, that is longer than Batman the Ride and Nemesis, a 50 miles per hour inverted roller coaster that could be transported around using 18 trailers. If needed, it could also be moved around the country by train. Costing 14 million Deutschmarks, around $9 million, with a drop of 99 feet and a total structure height of 115 feet, it was one of the largest coasters in Germany at the time, travelling or not. While I would normally talk about the ride's construction, this ride would be constructed and deconstructed over 60 times. The first opening of the ride would be on July 20th, 1995 at a fair in Dusseldorf. It opened 6 days later than expected, as the time to construct it was underestimated. The ride experience itself is quite intense. After leaving the station, the trains head up the loud lift hill and down a tight right-hand drop. Next, through a vertical loop, followed by a 0G roll and a tight double corkscrew. While all the inversions were done, the ending was the really intense part, as riders headed increasingly faster through tighter and tighter helixes, giving some really powerful positive G-forces. All of this was in an incredibly small space, weaving in and throughout each other. This was not a milder travelling version of stationary inverted coasters. This was every bit as intense, if not more so. Not only was it a great ride, but it also looked incredible. It was intense and exhilarating, leaving just the question: how does this thing move around?
In 35 Meter Höhe müssen die Arbeiter die bis zu 16 Tonnen schweren Teile zusammenfügen. Ganze 8-mal im Jahr wird der Eurostar aufgebaut. Die Statistik des Ungetüms ist eine Wissenschaft für sich.
Assembly and disassembly would follow a strict scheme, with every aspect of the attraction having a specified place on one of the many trucks used to transport it around the country. Each trailer would be specifically designed to carry that part of the ride. The trains would even remain attached to a specific piece of station track while being moved to speed up reassembly. The fastest time possible to safely deconstruct the roller coaster would be 8 days. This was if using the full force of 20 workers around the clock with 4 cranes. Then 18 trailers would carry the ride to its next destination. The usual time would take 10 days to disassemble and 14 to reconstruct piece by piece, support by support. In 1996, 2 trains on the ride collided, injuring 30 people when a safety shutdown stopped a train on the final brake run. It was hit from behind by the following train as it went through its block brake because the brake pads were so worn it was unable to stop the train passing through. After this incident, the ride operated with less trains on the track out of the possible 4 trains the ride had. Just as with any ride that is taken apart and put back together, after a few short years the ride did get rougher. Many even would say unpleasant, when combined with the incredibly forceful tight ride experience. From its first winter, some of the joints were stiffened and steel plates were added between the backbone and the track tubes to help with the roughness, but by the year 2000, the ride had begun to lose popularity due to stories about the rough ride it gave. In 2003, 8 years after it debuted, the Brook Company tried to increase the enjoyment of the attraction for riders by refurbishing sections of the track. Once again, several companies were brought in to work on the project. Each piece of track and the forces on it were measured to find what improvements could be made, and new track tubes were added to replace the roughest areas. Other changes included reducing the noise on the lift hill and updating the electrical system. Another issue the ride had was that at sections the ride would make a large banging noise when it went between certain sections of the track. This could be so loud it caused some passengers to have short-term hearing problems, such as beeping or humming in the ear. While they made the chain lift quieter, this noise never went away. The next few years saw further track pieces replaced during the ride's downtime and millions spent on improving the ride. However, the ride remained rough, but continued to appear at German fairs until at the Hamburg Fair in 2008 it appeared for the final time. The roller coaster would be sold, not only because it was becoming rougher, but because of staff shortage to even construct it in the first place. The huge amount of personnel required for the operation of the fairs were becoming harder and harder to find, especially for such large attractions. The sale caused the cancellation of the ride's appearance in Dusseldorf as well as the Munich Oktoberfest in 2008. By July 2008, the Eurostar had left Germany. While it sometimes appeared in neighbouring countries at fairs, this move would be permanent. It had been sold to Russian Gorky Park, located in Moscow, a place many German carnival attractions had been sent for their final operating place. The park had been interested in Eurostar since 2004 and wanted to purchase this unique attraction. It was finally sold in 2008. Eurostar will be the largest coaster in Moscow. The park was unable to pour foundations for large rides to be installed legally, so would get around this with the purchase of the huge travelling coaster. Eurostar will be located on the site of a standing but not operating roller coaster made by the Pax company. That would be until 2011, when they were forced to remove all attractions in the park after an inspection showed many of them as unsafe to operate, heavy noise from the area, and excessive electrical consumption for the operation of them. The city administration decided to return the park to its historical appearance, rather than the location of carnival rides. It would take over 1 month for the ride to once again be taken down after just 3 years. Eurostar was placed into storage nearby and never heard from again. Many speculated over the years where the ride had gone, had it been scrapped or lost to time. It had remained in storage, and rather than being lost, it would emerge once again. 8 years later, in 2019, the ride was back. Fully operational and looking fresher than ever, nearly 900 miles south in Anapa, Russia, at Detsky Park, where it had arrived at the park to be constructed the year before, and where you can still find it today. For years, Eurostar was the only inverting roller coaster in Germany, along with being one of the tallest. It wouldn't be until 1999 and 2001 that the country would get 2 Vekoma SLC inverted coasters, which were just as rough. And it would be 2006 when you could find a B&M inverted coaster in the country with Black Mamba at Phantasialand, all of which would be shorter and slower than the travelling version that was found at the fairs from 1995, which really puts the scale of Eurostar into perspective. The Eurostar was Oscar Brook Sr.'s final major project. He had created a technical marvel, a feat never seen before or again after. A ride incredibly unique and unusual. A gigantic inverted B&M style roller coaster made by multiple European manufacturers that could travel around the country, even if it was slightly rough to ride. Sadly, increasing operating, transportation, and construction costs make it unlikely any travelling coaster of this magnitude will ever be produced again. Thank you so much for watching this episode of Expedition Theme Park. If you enjoyed it, make sure you subscribe to join the expedition. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram for updates on upcoming episodes, and a special thank you to our Patreons for supporting the channel. We will see you next time.